There you go. How's that? All right. I call this meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Shields.
Okay, President McNall.
Here.
Vice President Clements.
Here.
Trustee Clemenson.
Here.
Trustee Headland.
Here.
Trustee Valentine.
Here.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
Now, may I have a motion, please?
Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? Great. Good evening, everyone. The next Board of Education meeting will be held on April 11th, 2023, 7 p.m. right here in the auditorium. I want to let everyone know that petitions are available in the district office for our one available seat on the Board of Education. Please contact Megan Shields, our district clerk, at her email address. Petitions and the first campaign expenditure statement are due no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, April 17th, 2023 in the district office. Our Haldane students and our community had a pretty extraordinary last 5 days to a week, which I will let Dr. Benante speak to, I think.
Thanks. I'm actually going to share a few things leading up to the last 5 days. We have a few administrators who were excused from this evening's meeting for a variety of reasons. So I just want to start with noting that our debate team finished first place at the BARD debate tournament, and included in the report is an interview or a video with the participants on the debate team, which I would encourage you to watch. They share a little bit about the format of debate, their experience with it, what they've learned from their engagement on the debate team that I think is great to see. So please take a look at that. I also want to acknowledge Matt Janjulis, who will be receiving the Putnam County Youth Service Award. I know Julia and I look forward to attending that event in May with Matt, who has been, it's just been fantastic to get to know Matt a little bit better this school year. And he's also active on our boys basketball team as the team manager. I'll get there in a minute. I also just wanted to draw the board's attention to the hiring process timeline for both the Director of Facilities and Director of Athletics positions are included in Mr. Elder's report as an attachment. So you can check those out. We just uploaded those today. Since Josh couldn't be here this evening, I know the board was curious about the process and the timeline for those two positions, so those are included there. As Sean alluded to, congratulations all around. First to our students who were involved in the production of Oklahoma. Had the opportunity to attend the matinee on Sunday. It's absolutely fantastic. So impressed, as I know we all are, by the talent and the enthusiasm that our students who were involved in the production have and is on full display during those performances, and everything was just excellent all the way around. A lot goes into that. Obviously, it's months of work, our displacement for a period of time, so the kids could have the opportunity to play in their performance space. And a thank you to Ms. Michalakis, Ms. McHugh, Damian McDonald, and all of the families who really support the play on the periphery or in the background. It was just an excellent production. And I'd also like to acknowledge our boys basketball team. I know I saw several of us up there on Friday and Saturday. We had a great send-off on Thursday with the whole school community. The team competed on Friday, won the semifinal game in a competitive basketball game, and came up just short in the state final. And I'll say that the team was down, I think, 18 going into the final quarter of play. great turnout by our community, and you get a little worried that it's getting away from them. And Coach Virginamo did just such an excellent job managing that last quarter of basketball, and the team did a great job on execution to put themselves back in a position to tie the game. Unfortunately, they came up short, and I was talking to Mateo today. The other team, I believe, made 17 three-point shots throughout the course of the game, which is just unheard of. I've never seen a team shoot like that before at any level. And, when a team has a hot hand like that and is performing like that, it's tough to beat. But Haldane was right there at the end. And I just think the way the kids came back, they stayed in the game mentally, they executed is really just a reflection of the character of those kids who were involved in the program all year long. And I know it's a tough loss on a big stage, but they really did represent our community very well, not just in the game, but also, and everything surrounding the game. At the hotel, out to dinner, they really represented our community very well over the course of those 3 days up in Glens Falls. And a big thanks to our community for coming out to support. It was, I think if the game was in our own gym, just as many people were there in Glens Falls. So I know some folks had the opportunity to attend. I'll just pause there in case anybody else wanted to say anything about the events that have been going on campus, and then I just have one more comment.
Mm-hmm, sure. Well, I can speak a little bit to Oklahoma, I suppose. I had the pleasure of seeing both casts over the weekend, so it's good six hours plus of Rodgers and Hammerstein. I know the musical very well, and like I said early out at the beginning of the process, it was the first show that I did when I was in high school, so I was having this very surreal experience of sort of remembering what my body was doing at that time, so there was a particular joy in seeing so many of our students really just do such a wonderful job. Absolutely. Really rise to the occasion. And what's not it's an old hoary chestnut, but it's a very complicated bit of music that they accomplished in a beautiful way. So we should be very proud. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I did want to speak just a little bit with the board and obviously anybody who's tuning in. We received a few communications regarding elementary class size allocations for the upcoming school year. And I just wanted to clarify, and it may be a point we continue to have to come back to depending on the community input that comes in, that I've made no recommendations to add sections to the elementary school in the 23-24 budget. I think I spoke to that at our last meeting. If a section were to be added, it would come from elementary certified staff who are assigned to the middle school. So my thoughts on this have been around the fact that we have existing staff that if we were to add a staff member to the elementary school general education, it would come from somewhere else in the district as opposed to being a budget addition in the recommended budget unless the board felt otherwise. Mm-hmm. But my recommendation would be to look somewhere else in the district to add that section as opposed to including a new position in the budget. That's why you don't see it did not see it in the budget recommendation last week. I have met with several of our teachers to discuss concerns about the class sizes or what would be the class sizes at first grade next school year. The group did ask me to reconsider a decision potentially to not add any sections, to keep it as is, which would mean class sizes at first grade would be somewhere between 18 and 20. I think right now, if all things were to stay the same, it'd be 19. Sometimes we have students move in, sometimes we have students move out or go to other programs, so it would be at 19 right now. I do have a follow-up meeting scheduled with the elementary staff this Friday. It was originally scheduled for yesterday. They asked if we could reschedule the Friday morning, so I will meet with them again there just to hear more of their thoughts on the matter and take that into consideration. But I think most importantly right now with where we sit, and it's a point I've discussed with the board over the years. I remember having this discussion with the board 5 years ago, and one that certainly presents in this matter is what constitutes a reasonable expectation for class size at Haldane. And I think right now is an opportunity to have that discussion because we sometimes, given the relative size of classes, come into and out of it, but it doesn't necessarily present every year. Sometimes it's just very logical. It makes sense to have 2 or 3 sections just because of the way the class sizes are. But I think we're going to have more classes or cohorts coming in now that are going to test us on whether or not we should have 2 or 3 or somewhere around there. So this should be a shared understanding between our faculty and our administration integration, and I don't think we have that right now. And that's something that should be based on objective measures, which does include teacher input to a degree. So right now, we need to work on developing that shared understanding, and that'll be part of our conversation on Friday. And that's where we lay, and I'm encouraged by the staff's engagement on this. And my hope would be that sometime over the next month, we'll arrive at having some parameters that we can use as a basis for our decision-making moving forward. And if there's a need to re-examine anything that in our planning for next year, we'll certainly do that.
Great.
That concludes my comments, unless there's any questions.
Yeah. I think we're good.
Okay.
Great.
If I may, Sean,
Please.
Roy Smith is the president of our National Honor Society. He's here this evening to provide a student report from the high school. Roy, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Go ahead. Stage is yours.
So yeah, you guys talked about Oklahoma. It was a phenomenal production. I thought it went really well myself. I was up in the light booth all weekend. So Haldane Drama's production of Oklahoma took place this past weekend. Students in the theater club have shared their talents in many genres, Oklahoma just being the most recent production, of course. We'd like to send a big thank you to our seniors involved in the theater department for the past 4 years, including, but not limited to, Conrad White, Lucas Vladimirov, Sophie Sabin, Nino Perricone, Maya Gelber, Olivia Flanagan, Alex Danilov, May Colum, Kate Bolte, Samuel Bates, and myself. I know Haldane will be in good hands, but it'll certainly miss the large number of seniors that will be graduating this year. Both Miss Mack and Miss McHugh, as well as Damian McDonald, have been with us since our freshman year. I'd also like to thank the following teacher, parent, and community volunteers: Matt Koch, Jeff Sniffen, Kathleen Ferry, Heidi Stevens, Shauna Chandler, Katie Bissinger, Jill Shofit, Catherine Kelly, Mike Bernstein, Mary, and Jim Mekalakis. And a big congrats to our debate team, as you discussed earlier. This year's team of Helena Kottman, Colin Hopkins, and Mark Furbo took first place over more than 27 teams at the annual Bar Debate College Debate Tournament. In addition, Kira Shanahan was recognized with an Individual Speaker Award, which was a big accomplishment for our team. This was a massive accomplishment for Haldane Debate for a number of reasons, including the size of the schools that we faced up there. You know, Haldane is a quite small class size, and a lot of the schools that travel up to Bard College for that debate tournament are quite large. So this was a big win for us, absolutely. And as many of you know, we had the opportunity to have our second send-off in 1 year this past week. According to Ms. Sniffen, she only remembers this happening a few times in the past for girls volleyball in the fall and for boys basketball in the winter. Due to the snowstorm, the send-off was lined up along the elementary school playground, which is, unusual, but it allowed the young students to get up close and personal with the basketball players, which was a nice opportunity for them. And these are some of the traditions that are an aspect of Haldane that we're really going to miss as seniors. It's really special, an important aspect of Haldane. So a big thank you to Ms. Thomas, Mr. Crow, and Ms. Crow, our athletic trainer, for making this happen. I'd like to thank the countless supporters that took the time to celebrate our student actors and student athletes this weekend, including you all, by the sounds of it. And Haldane is certainly a special place to be, and it has seen a great deal of success as of recent. So thank you.
Thank you, Roy.
So,
Just hold on a minute if there's any questions for you, Roy.
Don't be shy.
Roy, you're involved in the tech element of the production, and you have been for some time. Can you just talk a little bit over the years of your experience with that, and what are your takeaways now from those experiences over the course of 4 years?
Absolutely. So Damian McDonald, who's the coordinator for the booth and everything, has been a massive help to us all. I think my first show was The Lion King when I was in 6th grade, so I've been doing it for at least 5 or 6 years now. I started with sound, I moved to lighting, so I've seen all of the aspects up in the booth right there, and backstage and everything. So it's been, not only have I learned obviously the technical aspects of putting on a production, but Mr. McDonald has taught us tons of life lessons and about his career. He shared anecdotes to really help us as we move from we transition from high school to college to the professional world. So he's been a massive help there, and it's really been a great experience working and collaborating with a bunch of my fellow peers to put on some great performances. So
great. Absolutely. And just talk a little bit, what initially interested you in getting involved? What was the hook?
Sure. Yeah. So my mom is a playwright, as well as a professional writer. So I've always been, and my dad's he plays on Broadway. So I've always had music and theater in my house. But I've never really been inclined to be an actor. I'm not, I just haven't found it in myself to be up on the stage. So, I wanted to get involved in some way that wasn't necessarily in the limelight. So, I figured that this would be a great opportunity to figure out an alternative way to get involved with the shows, and so that was probably the main reason.
Great.
Yeah.
Roy, you also play tennis, don't you?
I do.
Do you wish Haldane had a boys' team?
I absolutely do. Although I will say, I hope Coach Dudar isn't listening. I also play baseball in the spring, so I would be conflicted there. But I would absolutely love a boys' tennis team. We actually started a tennis club, I believe, in my sophomore year, so 2 years ago, with one of my peers, Elliot Goldberg, and then Jesse Osterfeld, who graduated last year. We all play at Cross Court Tennis Club occasionally, but obviously, that's a big expense, so having a team here would be great. I think the interest is there, we just need to find it, so that'd be a great opportunity in the future. Yeah. No problem.
I have seen you in the limelight once before, though. I think it was Shakespeare Camp, and you're about my son's age, probably, when we first met. So
I do remember that.
Right here in this room,
it was right
probably,
here, yeah.
right? You were against that wall over there.
We played the game, the wink murder game.
The wink murder, yes, that's right, that's right.
The classic acting exercise.
Yes, it is very much
remember.
so.
It's
And
a great time.
I should say that I've known Roy since I met Roy when he was my son's age, but his mother is a former colleague of mine, and his father is my son's piano teacher. So it's so wonderful to see you here. So
thanks for having me. It's great to see you too. Yeah.
Well, Roy, I know our juniors are in DC, right?
Yep.
And the freshmen and the sophomore class are going down to Broadway tomorrow.
Yep, that's
to see a
right.
show. So I know you're a senior, and you probably have a very busy night ahead of you. So you don't need to hang on here. You're excused.
All right, thank
so
you.
you can get back to your schoolwork, and hope to see you in school tomorrow.
Absolutely, I will
right.
be there. All right,
Great.
thank you all. Take care.
Bye,
You too,
Roy.
Roy.
All right,
Yep.
moving on. All right. Moving on to our workshop topics. I think we'll begin with the elementary school detail report. Principal Jamin.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to start with reviewing the building goals and where we're at with that work this year. So in my presentation, I'm focusing on goal 1 and 2 together because the work ended up aligned and overlapping a bit. So for our first goal, last year in the fall, we had adopted the new MTSS plan and had rolled out our first implementation of that particular plan with its updates. And then we continued that work this year. So looking at improving how we were implementing it, looking at what hadn't worked last year and how we were shifting it, and making updates to those things. And then goal 2 was to work with the teachers in pursuit of the Haldane Essentials and Strategic Coherence Plan. And then our action steps in those two overlapped a bit. So with our professional development, we worked with BOCES. We actually were there this morning in our most recent data cohort work. So looking at different ways to gather and analyze data and how to put it together in ways that reveal more information and more insight into what you have in front of you. And then we've had a lot of work on with our summer curriculum work by our teachers, grade level planning and curriculum writing focused around developing curriculum. And as we did that, the work was focused on both the Haldane Essentials, but a lot of the teachers were looking at tying in their assessments and their progress monitoring for students and how they were aligning that within the units that they were writing, which is why I said it overlapped a lot, where when they were updating their reading units, looking at what the skills were and what phonics assessments they might use at that point in the curriculum to then progress monitor their students, that they were tracking their progress if they were struggling or doing well, and just tracking that through. So a lot of the unit plans that teachers were developing supported both goals. Some of the things that, not yet. not there. Some of the things that we also incorporated this year that were a change in practice, as I said, looking at our MTSS plan and seeing where we could improve it, we did get our electronic report cards, and as we had talked about earlier in the year, some of those snapshots of the way our students are progressing in certain standards or in their learner behaviors is now something that we can access without sorting through those stacks of paper report cards. So we were able to incorporate that in our winter data teamwork. And then we are also looking at our Haldane literacy profile. So what that is mapping out not just the standard of are our students reading with their grade level phonics skills or are they writing with their grade level phonics skills, but breaking it down by trimester and saying these are the phonics skills we would want a kindergartner to have if they are at grade level, below grade level, or above grade level first trimester, and then second and third, and then also saying if you're trying to do that, this is the assessment that we will all do, and this is what we would hope to see on those, and putting it into a more cohesive map of what K through 2, when you're looking at phonics in particular, would look like, and then expanding that work up into the vocabulary skills that we'd be looking at 3 through 5. So that Haldane literacy profile hasn't been updated in, I would say, 8 or 9 years. So we've been through a couple different curriculums and different programs. So just making sure that it reflects our current best work and practices. So that work is underway. We spent some time about a month ago working on it and collecting some information, and then a chunk of time also looking at that on Superintendent's Conference Day in March most recently. Now I'm good, thanks. We also have Megan Hargrave coming in for literacy staff development, and she has done work with us both on the curriculum and the Haldane Essentials, and then also MTSS plan. So when we are talking about literacy right now, there's a lot of discussion of the science of reading and what does that mean for literacy practices. And so science of reading isn't a curriculum, it's a summary of research on best practices in teaching literacy. So the curricular resource we use is the Teachers College Units of Study. But then science of reading practices are particular approaches that teachers can use and incorporate into their reading instruction that would support development of reading skills. So the Teachers College units have been criticized on a few of their units, in particular strategies that they're using. But it's not the whole program. So what we've done with Megan and with our teachers attending some professional developments is identifying the places within the curriculum where there are better practices we could utilize, and then rewriting those units using some of the resources that have come out, and then our work with Megan to make sure that if we are using a balanced literacy approach that has a mini lesson and then time for independent reading, and that kind of a structure that we do believe is beneficial for students, that we make sure that our lessons and the instruction on how to decode have all the up-to-date research within them. So I put there as one particular strategy. On the left, you see Edna the elephant, and she is cooking. And this is an older leveled text that our kindergartner first grade might use, where it says she puts sugar in the bowl. And puts and bowl are not decodable words. Puts doesn't follow the rules. The U's not saying bowl is not saying the correct sounds for what you would be decoding there. But that would be a level A book, and it relies a lot on pictures and patterns for the students, where you put the sugar in the bowl, you put the flour in the bowl, the next page is you're putting something else in the bowl, and a kindergartner can pick up on that pattern, look at the picture, and decide what they're putting in the bowl. Whereas on the right, you have a decodable text, which are now, our teachers have spent a lot of time over this year switching over into these sorts of books in their curriculum, where in a bit, mom says, add it in, says mom, are all words that follow the literacy, the phonics patterns for the letters, and a kindergartner can learn the rules, apply the rules, and decode the text in front of them. And if they mess up on a word, you can figure out which phonics skill they're struggling with versus picture cues. So like that's an example of a science of reading practice that Megan worked with our teachers on in our September and November professional development, and then they've been working on using professional development time to make sure that they are choosing the best texts for their students. So an example of one of the things that they've been working on with vocabulary. She also spent a long time with them modeling different small group strategies that you can use with students for any skill, and going into the classroom and using them as models to work with, where she would work with the students and show how those techniques could be done. So that work, again, has supported our MTSS work of intervention, but also our curriculum writing work. This is our winter NWEA data. This is showing our students who are average or above average with their reading. Low average students are still within that average range that you would expect to see from students, but they are students that we would be monitoring with progress, monitoring within the classrooms. They might be a tier 1 group where the teacher is working with them in an additional small group and doing an intervention. So these are our students who are at or above grade level, but then we do have students who are at grade level, but in that lower average range where you'd be tracking them to make sure, we don't want them to fall below. Our kindergartners obviously don't have a winter assessment from last year. They weren't with us. But then just to give you an idea of where our students are, we collect this data every fall, winter, and spring. So our first graders, this is their percentile, not their achievement score, so where they fall on that normal curve. So our first graders went up. Our second graders is a bit of a tricky data point in that you're not comparing apples to apples. The K1 test is read to them and they listen to it and it tests their comprehension. Whereas when they shift to second grade, it's read to they read it themselves without listening. So there is a drop there. And at the same time, that group of second graders does have a few more struggling readers. So for all the students, the low average and the below average students are students that myself, Ms. Saunders, and Ms. Pastula are meeting on regularly to look and see how they're growing and whether they're making progress on their reading goals. And we did dig into second grade at our winter data team meeting. And a lot of those students that are in that below range, they are all actually making growth, but they're not closing that percentile. So they are continuing to grow, but the gap isn't closing as much as you would want it to get them out of that low average range. So when we looked at that data, there was a higher number of students below average that moved into the low average, but they haven't yet moved into an average range. And our other grades are doing pretty well. Fourth grade is right around, I think it's 1 percentage point off. They did have a big summer slide where their percentile, if you looked at the fall, was a lot of growth between fall and this winter. So we weren't particularly concerned about that data point. It seemed to just be a high winter. Within the range, you might just have some variability. So overall, our students are where we want them to be or growing towards it, which is good news. And then we have our school climate survey that was administered in the late spring last year. And our goal was to look at the data that we got for that from the elementary. At the elementary, it was our teachers and staff gave input, and then 3rd through 5th. So K1, 2 weren't included in the survey just because of their ability to answer a survey independently at the lower levels. So we looked at some of the overarching themes that came out of it as a faculty in the fall. Our elementary coordinators and curriculum council have had a chance to have more detailed examination and to make some recommendations for what we're going to do with that survey for this coming year. And then we also got a chance to, so as an administrator looking at the teachers' feedback and the staff feedback, we made a particular focus this year on professional development, which was a point that the teachers had a lot of feedback on, to make sure that it was connected to their work, like the work with Megan Hargrave, our work with our math search, and also to make sure that it gave an opportunity for connection with their colleagues, connection to each other, and just to create some positive experiences and common practices with our staff. As a faculty at the elementary, we did look at one particular data point that just led to some questions, and so we had a chance to look at that and brainstorm around it. I think it's on the next slide. So something that we do really, really well, and we have a lot of positive feedback from the students, is in the area of relationships with teachers. So how respectful are your teachers towards you? 90%. And that actually, when you look at that compared to other districts of a similar size, is the 99th percentile. How excited would you be to have your teacher again? 86% of our students said they would be excited to have their teacher again. Again, in the 90th percentile of districts that are similar. So that is excellent. But then we had these two data points within the same section of, if you walked into class upset, how concerned would your teacher be? Or when your teachers ask, how are you? Do you think they really want to know the answer? And those two data points were not favorable. And so we spent one of our faculty meetings really brainstorming on, we do care about how they feel. We do care if they have a problem. We feel that way, but somehow that message, while our students are feeling respected, while they're feeling connected, while they want to return to us, that feeling isn't getting to them. So what barriers could be causing that? What could be getting in the way? And brainstorming how we can address that as individuals and as a building. So that was a really good discussion that we were able to have and think about, and try to get to the bottom of what that is and change that feeling for our students. And then we have two building initiatives that I wanted to highlight that aren't directly tied to those two goals, but have been a lot of work that the teachers and everyone have put in. So the first is our math curriculum search, which if you remember, we had carried over to this year, and Josh and I are hoping to be presenting to you our recommendation after working with our teacher leader team to select a curriculum. This fall we went, and we're going to have another detailed presentation, so I don't want to spend too much time of it, but this fall we went through and we actually trialed full units of the two programs we had narrowed it down to, knowing that no program is perfect. You're going to have to supplement in some way and make sure that we reach all of our students, but looking at more than a lesson or more than a couple of lessons, looking at a full unit from Big Ideas and a full unit from Eureka Squared in each grade level, and then really digging into that. We had a chance to meet virtually with some schools that use each curriculum and get the pros and cons from them, and spend some time really talking about what the pros and cons of each are, and then within that, what cons do we feel like we're most capable of supplementing or closing those gaps within the building so that we have the best possible program for our students. So you'll hear more about that, I believe, sometime in the near future. And then I wanted to make sure you guys saw, because a big part of last year's budget was the increased arts and education funding. So we've been putting that to good use. There's still a few programs that haven't been scheduled. We have a little bit more money we could spend for that. But these are just an overview of the programs that have come into our building over the course of this year. So authors, crafts that support a better understanding the building of that Native American village, writing and creating pop-up books in our K-1 classrooms, a visiting theater residency, storytelling, micro-memoirs are coming to 5th grade, the use of journaling as both a writing practice and a mental health practice for our 4th grade, garden recess, the Mohonk Preserve of designing pond animals. So just so many things, and it's really enriched our program and enriched the experience of our students. So I'm thankful for our community support and your support in getting that into the building, and we'll continue to use it well. I think that is all, so I am open to your questions.
spelling.
Sure.
Is spelling considered part of literacy? And I've noticed a difference between my two kids in a difference of 3 years. And it was definitely pre-pandemic, before, and second kid post-pandemic. But that seems to have changed, the spelling. And I know that I've just in talking sort of casually that I'm not sure if there is a spelling curriculum, so I don't know if you could speak.
So there is not a spelling curriculum. The research on spelling is that it's best learned as part of your writing. So it would be monitoring those phonemic awareness and phonics skills for students so that they know which letters and sounds would be used to make that, and then conferencing them within their writing and noticing a pattern of your child is struggling with this type of word or this type of pattern, and then setting goals around that within their writing program. So it ties into their reading skills with making sure that they know and understand how those connect. But that's the best practice is to do it within their writing. So I know some of our teachers will send home spelling lists if they see that their class has a particular struggle or a pattern. But what I would expect within that would be then, words that follow a pattern that they've been having a hard time with, and really trying to reinforce that pattern versus here's your 10 Christmas words on Friday that you're going to have a test on. So really trying to tie it to those reading and writing sound rules.
And is that considered sort of earlier, like K through 2, or is it sort of across?
So word work would be more within the 3 through 5, honestly. So within the K2, you'd be looking at, they have an extra half hour within their day to specifically use the phonics instruction and the phonics resources that we have. And then as they shift through to 3 through 5, it would be more work during that cross-curricular time of incorporating it into science, incorporating it into social studies, incorporating it into writing, and using that time there to then do a study on a word that maybe the whole class is really struggling with that pattern.
And has that changed a lot over the last 2 years? Is it always changing based on what you see, or?
Before I started, there was an examination of spelling and whether there should be like spelling units, but that was before I started. By the time I started, and I believe it was even I think it was a few years before that, 3 or 4 years before that particular, like, spelling tests and spelling lists was eliminated.
Thank you.
Good.
I have two quick questions. One
Yeah.
that's relevant and one that'll take us on a little bit of a tangent, so get ready. The one that's potentially relevant is, could you tell me what how a literacy profile is different from or works with the curriculum? Like, what is it exactly?
Yeah,
really?
no, so that's a great question. So if you took the giant book that is Unit 1 of first grade, let's say, it would map out it's the curricular resource. So it's going to say, for the first 2 weeks, this is your unit. These are the different stages of your unit. This is how you would map out day 1, day 2, day 3. But within the beginning of that unit, TC and other curriculums that lay it out well would tell you these are the skills that you're going to see within this unit. Mm-hmm. And so not all of those skills are expected to be taught to mastery. Some of them in that unit, okay. Right? So you might be introducing some phonics skills or some sound skills in the first unit of kindergarten, September through the end of October, let's say. But you don't expect the kindergartners to master all of those skills by the end of that unit. You're going to expect them to have mastered some of them, right? So it might be some certain letter IDs or certain sound IDs that you would say these would be ones we would want mastered by the end of October. And then the others that wouldn't be taught to mastery would come up again, maybe in the second unit, maybe in the third unit, maybe not till spring, depending on what they are, and they're going to get introduced over time. So the literacy profile would map out which ones are we saying we believe that, so our trimester ends the beginning of December, that kindergartners, if they're on grade level, would master by the beginning of December. And then if they also knew these, they'd be above grade level. Okay. And if they only knew fewer, they'd be below. And then again, you'd have others that were introduced, and then you'd have that cycle. So we're trying to explicitly say which ones are for mastery, which ones are above grade level, and which ones are below, and what assessments are best for those particular sounds, which right now, you might have two teachers who are using very similar assessments, and so then it's coming to an agreement, actually, this one does that better, so we're all going to give that one at the beginning of November, because I was using this one and you were using that one, but let's use a consistent one.
All right, that's super helpful. The one that's going to take us on a little bit of tangent.
Okay,
You've
I'm ready.
mentioned this before, and you mentioned it here, but I'd love you to, do you mind giving like 3 minutes, maybe at most, on data teams? Because I know it has come, I'm excited to see the use of it and this becoming a practice.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever had a formal, this is how data teams work, and maybe that's something we can do future, but could you just talk about it, how you're using it and how it works now?
Sure. So first I will say the data team work that we're doing with BOCES right now, our goal of that is within the MTSS plan, we said each building would have a data team.
Okay, yep.
And we didn't quite define that well. So we all went and did our best work, but all did things slightly differently.
Yep.
So now it's coming together and saying, all right, what things are being done differently because the data you have at elementary is different than the data, I don't have Regents course pass rates or those kinds of things. I have standards and where they're at there. So which things are different and they make sense, and which things could we have a common K-12 practice? Yep. Is there data that we have K-12 that we should all look at the same way? Which, yes, we do. We have NWEA that we give up till 11th grade, I believe. We have attendance data. We have discipline data. We have certain things like that that are common across. We have different members right now. So who's on my data team versus who's on Dr. Silky's versus who's on Ms. Sniffin's right now is different. Everybody did it and wanted to make sure we got started, but now we're able to look back and say, what do we think should be common and what should we do that is different? So we're working on that, and that was actually our major goal for this work that we're doing with BOCES is to have those discussions. That team, the team that's going to BOCES is the 3 principals,
Yep.
Josh Elder,
Yep.
an elementary teacher, a middle school teacher, and a high school teacher.
Okay.
I think there's actually 2 middle school teachers because we pulled in a guidance counselor for that perspective too.
Okay. Cool. I think I would love to hear it
Yeah,
at
so
some point.
right now the elementary data team is myself and our 2 AIS teachers, and currently at the elementary level, our work takes the bigger lens. So if you had a student you were concerned about, you would call a student support team meeting where we would look at the data you had from your class, look at their broader data. Maybe you have the NWEA, maybe if it's 3 through 5, you have state test, classroom assessments, those things. And we're looking and we're saying, we are looking at Joey, we're worried about him. Where does he fall on our exit and entrance criteria? Should he get more tier 1? And do we have suggestions for what you could do in your classroom? Are we thinking that he should get pulled out and get tier 2 work with Ms. Pastula or Ms. Saunders? Do we think it's a social emotional sort of thing and we should be pulling in Ms. Curry or Ms. Fawnin? Do we think it's speech, OT? All of those things fall under MTSS. The data, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. The data team takes a bigger look.
Yeah.
So we're taking a step back and looking at the grade level data and saying, do we see any trends here? Yep. Do we see any patterns of, gosh, what's going on with this grade level? Like we looked at the 2nd grade and said, oh, there's that drop. Oh, okay, wait, they're all growing. They're not closing it and going up, but they moved from low to below to low. That's still progress. All right, are they all getting tier 2 support if they need it? And taking that sort of step back where we want to make sure, because what you know sometimes you become familiar with, right? So if you've been working with your classroom, sometimes you don't take that step back and say, oh gosh, wait, I'm worried about Joey. He had a drop or his stayed flat. Maybe that didn't jump out at you and he hasn't grown over a little bit and he's still average, but you would have expected more growth, and that we're taking that look. So that's the role we have right now at the elementary is grade level and building level patterns. So we're meeting 3 times a year after those the NWA in the fall, after NWA and report cards in the winter, and then in the spring when we have articulation and class placement meetings, and we can take a look back and make sure, like, are our classes even? Are there, what should we be putting in place for September?
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. That's super helpful.
Absolutely. A little bit of a tangent, but a good one.
Two quick questions.
All right.
Um,
You only
or-
have 3 minutes, because that's what
No,
John
no,
said.
no.
I'm
No,
just-
no, John, we're way over 3 minutes. I wasn't going to stopwatch it, but, you know. So the first thing is, you know, the realization that we are such a small school, and so that is very advantageous, and you know, I hear you in the way that you're basically casting a data net to make sure no kids are falling through the cracks, which is phenomenal, by the way. The only other issue with being a small school and data is that obviously, with such a small sample size,
Yeah.
percentages get wacky very quickly.
Right, you have 1 or 2 that are up or down, and.
Right.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh my goodness, there's a massive issue here.
Right,
But then when you're actually, you know, dig into it, you're like, well, those are 3 kids and we have,
right.
you know, services applied. So that's, I guess, more of a point. Second is on the climate survey.
Yes.
So you pointed out on your good numbers, your GLOW numbers, that they were it's
Good
elementary
use
school.
of building
I will
level
do what I
vocabulary.
can
You
do.
read your child's report card.
Yes,
good.
I agree. On those numbers, you said, okay, we're in that, you know, that 90 or higher percentile. Sounds good. So on what you felt were the outliers, to those questions, were those also outliers for schools that were similar sized?
So we're in the average range for them. Actually, it's still above your 50th percentile of schools that are similar.
Okay.
We just,
So it's a good number.
yeah, it was still
So
a
I
good.
look at it, I say 7 out of 10. Right?
Exactly. We want to be 10 out of 10 on
I
all of
understand.
them, and we don't
I
like the
understand.
discrepancy, but it was still, it wasn't a low percentile within schools that were similar. It
So
was.
it's a grow-ish.
We want to grow
I
there.
got you.
And I want to, you know,
Okay.
and I feel like when I look at that, I see it as a disconnect, because I talk to my teachers. When they have a concern, they come talk to me, and I know they do care about our students and when they're upset. And so what are those barriers that are keeping our kids from seeing it? I think is
Responses based on that, so it was 3 to 5, right? Or that was
Yes.
3 to 5?
And I
so
don't-
how many people was that response?
I believe all of our students took it because we did it in school.
Okay.
So there may have been a couple of kids who were absent or what have you, but it wasn't go home and do it, and, you know,
Okay.
some kids did it and some kids didn't. It was done in the building. It was done in June. Okay, that has problems for all of us. You know, you're either really
pros and cons
excited
to
it's
that, for
summer
sure.
or you're really
Yeah.
burned out from your school year, you know.
Well, that's pretty
but-
impressive that by June, they said they wanted to come back and hang out with the teacher. I spent a year with you and I'm ready to come back.
I
That's
still
pretty
would
good.
like to see you in
That's-
September,
that's,
yes.
That's pretty
But
good.
it was I felt like it was a productive discussion with our staff too, and a point where we could think about it and think about something that could be done, not just you know.
No, I appreciate
so-
the reflection. I think that's
And our teachers had really
phenomenal.
good thoughts on it, so we were able to try some different things.
Great.
Right. Peggy?
Yeah, oh yeah, I have a few questions. Thanks for. Can you remind me, what's the phonics? So you mentioned the 30 minutes of like word work or phonics. You all are using the Lucy Calkins units of study phonics, is that right?
Correct.
And what's the reading intervention you all use for students in Tier 2 in the early grades? And
So we have both LLI and the new program is PAF, so Preventing Academic Failure for our
yes.
students who have a more intense need and need the.
yeah. So it's really great to hear the incorporation of different pieces of the science of reading into the early literacy. And I thought you did a really nice job about, you know, describing what a decodable text is. You know, it's a good example. And I think it's, you know, and it's, you know, such an important centerpiece in early literacy of the science of reading. You know, I'll be honest, I haven't quite yet heard, I haven't quite yet been convinced about why we're continuing to continue to use the Lucy Calkins units of study as our early literacy curriculum. I mean, especially when you look and see, from Josh's presentation a few weeks ago, which shows a not quite as positive outlook on our students' literacy achievement, with, more like, I think it was like in the 60s, maybe not quite 70% of students sort of meeting state, the state benchmark. The idea of enhancing an existing curriculum with science of reading, I think that's absolutely a great approach, but it then puts a lot of responsibility on the teachers to go out on their own and identify, well, what's an appropriate decodable text, right? Like, if that's not part of the existing curriculum. And Ezra just made a really good point that one or two kids in a school as small as Haldane, can really make a difference in terms of, the percentage of kids meeting benchmark, et cetera. But like, even when I look at the NWA results that you presented, and I really appreciated that you presented NWA because we hadn't seen them, and it gives us data for students K through 5. But like, when I look from like first to second grade, from a light blue line to a darker blue line, whether it's going from first to second to third to third to fourth to fourth or to fifth, like, you always want to see those. You definitely don't want to see them, you definitely don't want to see declines, and so when I look, for example, from first to second grade, it's not a huge drop, but it is a drop in terms of what the average percentile is for children. And I heard what you said, right, that second grade is a little bit different. Students have to read the assessment. You have to read the assessment instead of having it read to them in first grade. And so, I don't expect you to have like maybe you do have a totally convincing, response to my concern, but even your opening remarks, noted that there has been considerable, and I would argue pretty legitimate, criticism of the curriculum. And so it just, again, I think I haven't been convinced yet that it's the right early literacy curriculum for us.
And I would say we're thinking about that. Certainly, a lot of the criticism and concerns have come out over the last year, slightly plus maybe. And we're looking at that. We had a meeting on Superintendent's Conference Day to discuss what we saw when we had foundations versus what we're seeing with the TC phonics, which that is that specific phonics instruction versus reading and writing. There were gaps in foundations too, and there's difficulty there with the pacing and with the engagement the teachers saw, and with how they ordered it and how they laid it out. So I don't think anybody's saying we are going to do this to the end, and whether we hear criticism or not. But we're examining it and thinking about it and seeing what the programs we used before had that TC maybe doesn't, and trying to make those decisions in a thoughtful way. So
that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. Right, like continuing to think about it. I definitely appreciate that. I had one other really quick, and I can't hear perfectly well being remote. I had one quick question about the initiatives. So a recommendation is being finalized for a presentation to the board to adopt a curricular resource for math K-5. I didn't understand, was that the idea of a new curriculum or just like a supplemental program? Sorry.
So our curricular resource right now is Eureka, which we're trying to select which what we should choose, and we had narrowed it down at the end of last year to Big Ideas Math and Eureka Squared. And then we have been examining that over the fall, and I believe we've arrived at an answer. We're just not prepared to say it today. So there'll be a presentation with more details very soon.
Well, that's great, and I guess that's me not remembering. I guess because I knew that the middle school had been doing that, but I didn't remember that the kindergarten was also. That elementary school was also making a decision about adopting a new curricular resource. So that was just me forgetting that. Thanks for the reminder.
You can't keep it all in your head.
But
I said you can't be expected to keep it all in your head.
And then one really last quick question. So I was so excited last spring when you all rolled out the new report cards, and you spoke a little bit about it, like what they are and sort of how they work, and how have parents received them? I'm sure it's a switch, right? There's some sort of educative process, but overall, how do you think that the rolling out process has gone?
I have not heard a lot from families, but the little bit I have heard has been positive. So families saying, either referring to Glows and Grows, which shows that they're reading the narratives, which they didn't have before, or brief comments. And I have had 0 complaints,
So that's
which
fantastic.
is always good.
That's a plus.
Yes.
That's
Actually,
great.
and the other part that I have, parents have specifically reached out about is the change in the learner behaviors, which before, if you remember, were more, completes homework, does their classwork. It was more classroom procedure type reporting, whereas the new report card has group work, and we worked to align it with the Haldane Essentials, so how they engage with others, how they do those pro-social behaviors that we would want, how they're engaging in the work and in their classroom, and parents have said that they like that a lot better, that it focuses on what they most value in the classroom versus, I'm a principal, and I don't necessarily know that I want to hear about whether my kid is, checking a box. I know whether they did their homework or not. I see that. So hearing about those other things that I can't see, I think does have more value for our families.
And just one last thing, I really commend you all the way you've jumped into the work related to MTSS and sort of discussing the process of using data and that's a learning process of figuring out how to do it. But really, it's an important and challenging systems change, and it's really impressive the way that folks have really embraced, that challenge and that learning process. So thanks for sharing that with us.
All right.
I hate to be one or two more points. Number one, thank you, Peggy. It is excellent to have an educational researcher on the board. You have forgotten more than I will ever learn about what you just said. I do like my son gets the report card. It's great. I still lose money because he does well. So I have to pay now instead of 4s for ease, but he's happy about it. If we do go back to that NWA student reading level.
Yeah.
So one thing that I always think about data is kind of how you really track kids. You have, this winter 21 and this winter 22, but the
Yes.
other thing is you also have developmental changes that happen specifically between 2nd and 3rd grade.
Sure.
That's a big developmental year for children. And so do you have information that is, and John, you're more the data guy, but I'll try to... Longitudinal, thank you. You know what I'm saying. Where you have kids, each cohort of child on a chart, and you're tracking that against each other cohort.
I had 6 bars. So these are the same kids
Yep.
last winter. So the 5th grade bar is the 5th graders percentile when they were in 4th grade.
I understand that.
And yes,
tracking the cohort of kids.
We can track that cohort back many more bars.
And
I
then
just
put
didn't
that
put it
against
on
the other ones.
this slide for you.
Yeah.
And
No, I understand
Yeah.
it. Just saying for your
We
data
can,
point.
yes.
Yeah, because that comparative is incredibly, I would assume, very important, right?
yeah, absolutely. And if you'd like to see it,
No,
I'm
that's-
happy to sit down with you. But
Yeah.
we looked at it and said 6 or 7 bars for each of them would probably be too much for this
No, no.
particular report.
That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Jamin.
Yeah, so one of 2 building reports this evening. You know, and considering as Mary Ann comes up to provide her detailed report, come on up, Dr. Selke. We had quite a full agenda at the beginning of the year with our campus master planning reports, which we still will come back to the final product on those sometime in May or June. So obviously, there's going to be a couple of meetings where we're a little more full than we've been as compared to other years. So thanks for the conversation, and thank you, Christine, for your report. And now we'll have Dr. Silke provide the middle school detail report.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Benante and the board for the opportunity to highlight the middle school tonight. And I will try not to be repetitive, because one of the things that the board may have noticed is that our schools have oftentimes common goals, because our goals are based on the district goals, which are based on the strategic plan. So where there's overlap, I'll try not to repeat myself, but hopefully this will be like a good example of scaffolding, where maybe I'll bring forward additional information that will deepen the board's understanding of the work, or answers other questions that you may have. So that'll be my goal as I move through the presentation tonight. So this is an introduction and overview of the pedagogical philosophy guiding Haldane middle level instruction. Team teaching is at the heart of middle level pedagogy and allows for interdisciplinary approaches to teaching the New York State standards. So for example, this is an image of Reader's Theater, which integrates social studies and ELA standards. The small class sizes at Haldane lend themselves to authentic student-centered learning experiences. So moving right into the goals after that brief program overview. This detail report is organized by the goals, as I had said, and the first goal this year for the middle level was to look at the school climate survey and develop a plan of action to further enhance school climate. So I pulled out, this is just one question from one area of the student report. So the secondary students, 6 through, it was 6 through 12, but many of the 12th graders didn't take it because it was so late in the year. So either way, the questions were the same for the secondary schools, and this is one question in the section on school climate. So the baseline school climate survey that was administered provided us a lot of information. Families took the survey, teachers took the survey, faculty and staff, and our students. So the middle school determined that the students would be the best place to start to examine how to improve the experience for our students. So what you see in the slide is the response to one of the student survey questions in the secondary area. And although most students, this question was on behavior. So at your school, how much does the behavior of other students hurt or help your learning? And although most students don't find the behavior of their classmates to have a negative impact on their learning, 21% said that the behavior of other students hurts their learning a little bit, 12% said that the behavior of other students helps their learning some, and 3% said that the behavior of other students hurts their learning a tremendous amount. So this is a measurable area for us to focus on improving by growing our current social emotional learning program, Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, PBIS, which you would probably recognize as Haldane Middle School is True Blue. So what is PBIS? Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports is an evidence-based tiered framework for supporting students' behavioral, academic, social, emotional, and mental health. When implemented with fidelity, PBIS improves social emotional competence, academic success, and school climate. It also improves teacher health and well-being. So, as I said, you may be familiar with Haldane Middle School's True Blue. That was a collaboratively created motto that we have rolled out as our shared values. And students are provided with direct instruction on what it means to show teamwork, responsibility, understanding, and excellence. And this direct instruction is then reinforced with rewards and reteaching. So, moving on along, what we've done this year is that in addition to the direct instruction and positive reinforcement that every student receives, we've expanded to provide targeted secondary prevention to some students who exhibit undesirable behavior that may impact the learning of others, so to directly impact that part of the school climate. So this is referred to as Tier 2 PBIS, Tier 1 being what's applied to and taught to everyone. So the support provided at Tier 2 is more focused than at Tier 1, and Tier 2 practices that are being implemented this year include providing additional instruction in small groups or for individuals. The slide shows an example of a lesson on a consequence mapping exercise that students can complete with the teacher that's providing the PBIS instruction for them. Increasing adult support and supervision, providing additional opportunities for positive reinforcement, increasing prompts and reminders, and increasing access to academic supports, because sometimes sometimes behaviors follow academic slides. So if a student is struggling academically, behaviors start to show. And then increased family and community communication. So we're excited to see how that Tier 2 edition bears fruit based on the school climate survey as it's administered this spring. So other areas that we've put into place, and I'm just going through this quickly, but I realize the board may have questions about these areas as well. So if you want any further information, just please let me know. Enrichment.
I have a question in the.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's you kind of know it when you see it, but I'm curious if when we talk about undesirable behavior, what sort of network of behaviors are we referring to mostly?
So any behavior that goes against the code of conduct. So anything that would constitute that would lead to a consequence for a student would be an undesirable behavior. So, and that could be something as, so with PBIS too, there's a discipline flow chart. I didn't include it here. It goes through behaviors that are handled by teachers in the classroom, and then behaviors that are office referred behaviors. So even a behavior like calling out in class, right? That is oftentimes teacher handled. If the teacher refocuses and redirects the student multiple times, that's over multiple class periods, eventually that becomes an insubordinate behavior, and then that would be something that would be brought to my attention and could possibly be supported with additional Tier 2 instruction.
Great.
So in that case, the consequence map would look like, at the start of that consequence map, the student would go through it, and so you call out you're bored in class, right? So like what's the activating event is, so hypothetically you're bored in class, so you have a choice. You can call out and it'll lead to this set of negative consequences for yourself and for your classmates, or you can raise your hand and ask for clarification, or go through all the different positive choices that the student might have in that instance, and that way the student can learn that there's options when they're having a activating event or a feeling, or whatever the situation is, that they can choose a positive course of action or they can choose a negative course of action, and what that looks like and what that leads them to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And the procedure for sort of observed behaviors in the classroom is similar to unobserved behaviors that are reported by other students, or like.
So in terms of being referred for a Tier 2 class,
just curious
or a
about,
Tier 2, so, for example, we had a group of students who had a lunch bunch for eight weeks, and they had all Tier 2 lessons, and those were students who had repeated office referred behaviors. Mm-hmm. So I think this is what you're asking. So that's like one example. Mm-hmm. And then we had an incident in class where there were 4 students who were identified as using the classroom discussion to be unkind. And those 4 students were referred for one session with Ms. Fawnin on kindness. I see. So those are the types of like Tier 2. It's reteaching, but it's reteaching directed toward, rather than reteaching in general on teamwork, responsibility, understanding, and excellence, it's reteaching geared toward what the undesirable behavior is that's being exhibited.
Yeah, that's great.
And just to add one thing, I'm sorry, Ezra, if I may, on that point, you mentioned the 4 students who maybe were referred to Ms. Fawden for additional support, given behavior that was observed in the classroom. Those students may also have a consequence by way of our code of conduct as well.
Correct.
But also the further intervention through the Tier 2 support that you mentioned, correct?
Correct. So this runs parallel with the code of conduct.
Thank you.
And it also includes increased communication with the family. So if a student is identified for Tier 2 instruction, the family is engaged in
Got
that.
it. Just wanted to make sure
Yes.
our audience was aware of that.
Dr. Silken? Just one point, just to go back. See, in that example you just provided is another issue with data, right? So if you look here, you're like, oh my goodness, we have all these students, 35% or so of students feel that there's behavior that's hurting their learning in the class. But then you just said, because we are such a small school and because you have a very good ability to identify individuals that cause this, you said it could be 4 people. Right, so you have an outsized, so this is the other issue. There are pros and cons to a small school. So I find it excellent that you see this. These are the tiers and the interaction and the interventions that we could put in place. But this is the outsized impact of a few people.
Yeah.
Correct? Right?
Yeah,
And
I mean,
so
if
you're
you
going
look
through
at,
this
if
incredible
yes,
process.
yes, if you look at the slide, the actual numbers of students are on the right-hand side. So, and this is six. This was administered grade 6-12. So, you can see the actual number of students, and it's quite small when you consider the number of students that answered this question. But like I think Ms. Jamin said very well, we are committed to continuous improvement, so it's never going to be satisfactory.
No, it's great.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, apart from introducing Tier 2 PBIS interventions, we're also adding enrichment activities. So assemblies, we have 3 assemblies coming up for the remainder of the month of March. We're very excited about that. And we already had an assembly on digital citizenship. So assemblies on anxiety, empathy, and the arts, Romeo and Juliet are coming. Clubs and field trips. I'm very proud of the fact that our middle school has a robust offering of clubs. If you look in the area, middle schools oftentimes don't have that kind of roster of clubs. Clubs oftentimes come into their full blossom in high school, whereas our middle school does offer a nice selection of clubs. Guest educators, already mentioned Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival. We had a poet in residence for our 8th grade, author visits. The Center for Environmental Education has come in. So all of these enrichment activities, not only are they just good for kids in general, we also imagine that they'll improve the results of the school climate survey because our students will feel more engaged. Communication of these enrichment activities to families and faculty and staff. Student focus groups. This has been fun this year, meeting with students and hearing what they appreciate and what they would like to see added. So, a very simple example from the student focus group is that the students wanted the cafeteria to bring back breakfast for lunch. And, it's such a simple thing, to say to Miss Norton, the students would like breakfast for lunch. Can we do that? And Miss Norton's like, yeah, we could do that. And it's a big deal to kids, though. It's something that they get excited about. So sometimes it's, the little things as well. And then revisiting the school climate results with the faculty, similar to what Ms. Jamin said, like doing different exercises. We did an exercise around that same student-teacher relationships where the faculty split off by grade level that they teach, and we looked at the roster of students in each grade level, and I asked the faculty to identify what they knew about students outside of school, and to identify the students that they felt that they could learn more about, and sent them off with a task to do that. And then we came back at 2 months later in a follow-up faculty meeting and talked about what we learned about our students. So things like that, I think, can work toward improving our school climate. So our second goal was surrounding the strategic coherence plan and alignment to the Haldane Essentials. So during the strategic coherence planning process, the Haldane community identified critical thinking, problem solving, communication, growth mindset, emotional intelligence, and wellness as essential attributes for Haldane students to attain during the course of the K-12 education, profile of a graduate, if you will. The faculty has reflected on the Haldane Essentials, what they mean, where they live in the curriculum, and how they manifest themselves in the middle level. And that work is taking place during faculty meetings, after-school staff development, superintendent's conference days, self-study, group discussions. And this year, the teachers set their professional goals around one of the Haldane Essentials. And I'm very proud to say that under Mr. Vergidamo, the student council has kind of adopted wellness as the school focus for an essential, and they held a Wellness Spirit Week. So we are in full stride of working toward the integration of the Haldane Essentials. Another area where you'll see this is in the curricular overviews that I know Mr. Elder has talked about in depth with the board. And I included another, I had previously included, I think, Ms. Boonshoff's 8th grade art overview with the integration of the essentials. I included for the board a link to Mr. McConville's 8th grade social studies overview with the essentials identified. So just, it's interesting to see the work that our teachers are doing to integrate the Haldane Essentials into their curriculum and standards. So moving right through to goal 3, which you heard a lot about from Ms. Jamin, and I'll try to highlight complementing information. The middle level focus on multi-tiered system of supports. This is about utilizing data to improve instruction for all students. So this image is the image that the board has seen as we went through and as the board adopted the updated plan. And I think listening to Ms. Jamin, I'm going to try to highlight data teams this way. Universal data teams operate under the goal of informing practice or program, whereas our student support teams are still data teams, but they operate under the goal of assisting individual students. So if you think about that umbrella, that may help operationalize, like what does this all mean? And I include positive behavior intervention and supports here because the multi-tiered system of supports refers to response to intervention not only for academics but also for behavior. So it plays into this system and this goal as well. So I have presented in the past, several years ago now, like what a universal screener is and why it's important. But I think that, unless you're living and breathing NWA, you're not necessarily thinking or, imagining where that plays. So what is this thing that our kids are taking spring and winter and fall? And it's a universal screener that has short answer questions. It's adaptive, so it's on the computer, it's adaptive. So if a student gets the question correct, the next question is slightly harder. If the student gets a question incorrect, the next question is slightly easier, and it goes through that way to really identify what a student is ready to learn next in their zone of proximal development. So it really helps to look at these scores for teachers because we can make decisions not only about academic interventions for supports for gap areas, but also for enrichment and for where we can stretch the curriculum as well. So it could go in both directions. So I included just a snidbit from the NWA, just a different report than I've ever included before. And talk about small numbers, Ezra. On this I had to cut out because we have a student who's not an 8th grader who's in algebra right now, and I had to cut out that student because you would totally be able to identify what that student's score was. Yes, we have very small numbers, and but with that being said, we can see that this is the winter administration for algebra. And our students are in lines for mastery on the Regents, very high-performing results. And hold on to that picture for a second because I'm going to go through the Math 8, and then I'm going to talk about a little bit how we use this. So in the next slide, these are the winter results for the Math 8 NWEA. And so when you look at them together, you can see that the Math 8 students, if you're looking at this in a very lay level, you could say, okay, well, I could see where the Math 8 students have weaker math skills than the algebra students. So that makes sense. And we've had very preliminary conversations about, well, what if we offered algebra for all at 8th grade? So the universal data team might look at this and say, what kinds of supports or what kinds of pre-teaching would we need in 6th and 7th grade to strengthen the instruction so that algebra for all in 8th grade would make sense for our kids, right? So that's the kind of thinking the universal data team can work on. And I'm sorry, this goes into the next slide, Megan. And what the student support team would do with that data is say, okay, there are 2 students who are not in line to receive a 3 or 4 on the state test. Are they in AIS? Oh, good, they're in AIS. What else can we afford for them? So I think of it as one as a whole group informing our program and instruction, and the other one working toward individuals. So, and that's basically what the last slide goes over, that the student support team focus on individuals for 10th period AIS and other interventions. And of course, the student support team may be also a step toward the realization that a student may need to be referred to the Committee on Special Education, or if it applies to the 504 committee, so that's also part of what the SST can identify or do as well. Any questions?
Reach the questions.
The questions.
One question.
Yes.
I swear. Algebra 8, how many sections?
2 sections.
2 sections.
And that's typical. We usually have 2 sections.
You usually run 2 sections. So that's 32, so roughly 16 to 17, depending.
Depending on the class size. Yeah. And on who's identified for acceleration.
Yep. Okay.
Did I hear you say there's 2 sections of algebra in 8th grade?
Yes. Yes, Peggy,
Thanks,
2 sections.
Thanks. Sorry. Thanks.
Going back to the PBIS, you were talking a little bit about that. Has it worked? Do we have data yet, or is it still it sounded like you were just implementing it, or do you have data to show that the efforts that you're putting into it is resulting in these kids behaving?
Yes, so we're collecting data on the the addition of tier 2 interventions this year. The Code of Conduct Committee is actually doing a review of data, I think, over the last 4 over the last 4 years to look at, the number of, to look at really the pandemic and how the pandemic has impacted in-school and out-of-school suspensions and the causes of those suspensions. So it'll be interesting to look at the data from the tier 2 interventions at the middle level and, birdwalk that with the information from the Code of Conduct and, really get a picture to try to see, how we could best support our students to not only achieve academically, but also, continue to achieve behaviorally and represent Haldane as well as they do.
And that's coming.
Yes,
Okay.
I would say by the end of the year. So, that's at the end of the year, if there's opportunity, or at the beginning of the year, that would be opportunity to definitely report more.
Cool, thank you.
All right, I lied. Sorry, Dr. Silky. You had mentioned earlier in expanding the PBIS program, you had mentioned community. That was one of the words you had said, and you had said it separate to the school. So I wasn't sure if you meant the learning community here or the community at large, and it just made me thinking, are there these situations where you're looking at, again, the advantage of a small community, in which you're looking at those tiered levels of interventions to include opportunities for students in the community?
That's an excellent question. Where I thought you were going to go with it is how are we involving the community? And I was going to share that on April 17th, Dr. Nickerson, who is a behavioral research expert and talks about how parents comes and talks to communities about how parents could support their children socially and emotionally. Like, that would be an example of how we're informing parents in the community about the work. In terms of working with the community to create, like, I think you're saying, like, activities or opportunities for, I think that's wonderful work. It reminds me of before the pandemic, we used to do a 7th grade community service day. And what that entailed was the 7th grade team would collect all kinds of organizations in the community that could benefit from a helping hand from the 7th grade, and then the 7th grade was grouped out, and they spent the whole day, they went out in force. So who went to the food pantry, who went to Main Street to do a cleanup, who went, so, and we did that before the pandemic. And that would be, if we get back to that, that would fall under a tier 1 universal, behavioral support for students.
Thank you.
Sort of a question and a comment. Middle school, I think character education middle school is really important, and it's super, super hard.
Yes.
So I appreciate, my sense is it's super, super hard. So I appreciate everything that you guys do to really support the parents and the community in character education. And that being said, my sense from the undercurrent, like, I would look at slide 4 and be really disappointed that 36% of the students say there's behavior that's hurting my academic experience. Grant, that could be one jerk affecting 36% of the students, but still, I would aspire to be a school where students are helping each other perform better, right?
Absolutely.
So I think we all share that. And I think underlying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think underlying your adoption of PBIS2, we need more than we have previously. There's stuff going on that we need to address with more attention and rigor and support. And this isn't really I guess this isn't really a question, but I appreciate all the work you're doing. I think it's an unfortunate situation to be in. I don't know the root causes of it. It's small school, pros and cons, but it's a challenge. And I hope we and the parents and the community can help us get to a place where some of this starts going in the right direction.
Absolutely. And it's a challenge not just for Haldane, it's a challenge across the board. If you're, attuned to the news, school news. And one of the things that I love about PBIS is that it's data informed, it's research based, and Haldane didn't create tier 2 because PBIS is a research based data informed program. It's written with a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So it is written that way. We had just rolled out tier 1 the first year of the pandemic. Right. So we spent a whole year developing what our school motto would be collaboratively. That's part of the work. And then we rolled out, and that's typically what schools do. They'll roll out their universal interventions first, and then they'll build. So we were going to build to tier 2 no matter what.
That's a good point.
And it's needed. So it's both
as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Peggy?
Yeah, I have two comments and then one question. I really appreciated you sort of laying out sort of what you're doing to address some social emotional needs in the middle school, like laying it out in this framework. I mean, of MTSS and PBIS, like as a real example of how you all are doing that. I also really appreciated really kind of the primer on like what's a universal data team and what's the student support team, and the board not without the agreement of district leadership, but I guess I would say district leaders and the board for a number of years have really wanted the district to move more towards database decision making, and part of doing that is actually making sure the board really understands what that means. And I'll be honest, like there's lots of different ways to do that, and until the combination between Ms. Jammins and your presentations, like it was very educative, and I really appreciated that, because it really needs to be a partnership where we're really understanding we can speak the same language. So and then my question, though, so when you look at the two, and I really, appreciated these examples of what you all learned from, NWA, but I'm actually sort of putting these NWA results for the current 8th grade math folks or students, and in conjunction with the high school's request that we implement a pre-algebra algebra section next year, which isn't something we've had historically, and actually kind of is in the opposite direction of trying to move more students into being ready for algebra at the 8th grade. And so what's confusing to me, and I'm wondering how you make sense of this, is that like if you look at the results, and I'm flipping back and forth on my computer, but like obviously our students who are in 8th grade, it's great that they're doing really well, and they're actually really on track to be, for the most part, on track to be successful in algebra as 8th graders. But then, or I guess that's actually it's not actually algebra, that's just a math assessment. So not a big surprise that the kids that are taking algebra are doing pretty well in math. What's interesting to me, though, is that like even the students who are in Math 8, like the vast majority of them are at or above the 50th percentile, and yet clearly you all are perceiving that there is an unusual math need for these kids when they get to the 9th grade. And it's like, I wouldn't have expected that. Like, how do you make sense of the fact that for the most part, our kids are, at or above the 50th percentile, but going into 9th grade next year, there's this need for this other, this pre-algebra algebra section.
I go back to Ezra talking. Go ahead, Becky. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's a big question, and if you're not ready to answer it tonight, that's fine too.
I'm happy to share with you what I have thought about, and there may be more to think about on this, but what I have thought about, I think it goes back to Ezra's statement about small schools, and I think that where the high school may be seeing a need right now for the algebra class with the lab, in future, like if we're looking at programming and we're using data to inform our programming in the future, in my personal opinion, from my studies, it's always the better practice to provide intervention to close skill gaps earlier rather than later. That doesn't mean that we punish high school kids that may need whatever supports they need, but for the future, I think what we could be looking at is strengthening instruction early on so that there isn't a need for that kind of support in algebra once the high school years roll around. And of course that takes time. Like you can't wave a magic wand and make that happen. It has to, that's going to take several years of work.
And I assume that's going into and the committee's decision on identifying a curricular resource, a middle grades math. So
if you recall, Peggy, the middle grades did adopt we presented to the board and the board did adopt.
Okay, you all did adopt.
Yes.
But that's pretty new.
Yeah. So 612 we have big ideas math.
Okay.
So, and the work that we've been doing is looking at the implementation, looking at the online components, because one of the reasons why we recommended Big Ideas Math is because they had a robust online component for skill recovery. So, looking at the implementation of that and seeing how, is that working? What's the fidelity with that resource? And then whatever the outcome is for the elementary, there'll be work around looking at how the entire, looking how the scope and sequence lays out, and are we seeing our kids close gaps and strengthen their math skills? So I think that's like the work over the next 5 years, is to ask those hard questions like, how do we support students that need support now, regardless of what grade level they're in, and also strengthen the instruction and close gaps for students as early as possible.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Maggie?
No, I'm good.
Thank you, Dr. Seelke. All right, moving on to, this is our first communication from the public on special presentations and agenda items. The Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments on special presentations and active agenda items. For those who wish to address the board, please sign in, state your name for the record. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Disparaging remarks and discussion of district personnel are strongly discouraged. Although we do not engage in dialogue, we are listening. So please leave your contact information with the District Clerk, Megan Shields, for prompt follow-up from the board president or superintendent. If you keep talking about it, I might steal it.
Sorry, I'm getting my act together here.
It's fine.
My name's Lisa Vink. I'm a Haldane parent. Hi. I have, my husband and I have a kindergartner and a second grader currently at Haldane. I first just want to say that we love the school. We're very happy with our experience so far in the only couple of years we've been here. And this is just a wonderful place and community. There has been discussion about possibly consolidating next year's incoming first grade class from 3 classrooms to 2 in order to address the need of an additional classroom or teacher in the 6th grade. I've spoken with Dr. Benante, and I understand that the way it works is that the school leadership team is who makes the recommendation to him, who then recommends it to the board via the budget next year. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I have it right. And as much as I'm happy to continue the conversations with Dr. Benante and school leadership, I want to be here on behalf of the first grade, not all first grade parents, but the ones that I have spoken to. And just want to make you aware of some concerns that we do have about this possibility for next year. So I just wanted to make you aware of questions from myself and other parents that are concerned with the possibility of this change, and just want to be sure that you're taking into consideration these questions before you make any decisions. So I don't expect any answers to these tonight. I just want to put them out there into the universe. And I'm just going to go ahead and list them off for you. How was the elementary faculty approached, and what were their reactions to this decision, knowing the students' performances so far? The current total class size is 38, small. How many additional students typically enroll before the start of the next school year? Will that up the class size? If this decision is made, will the class of 2035 only ever have 2 classrooms moving forward in elementary school? When and if this decision is made, when will the parents be notified? What kind of support will the first grade teachers have if they have larger class sizes? Aides are wonderful. But will there be teaching assistants available for both classrooms? Under key adjustments of the proposed budget, the school is gaining $260,000 from retirement breakage and over $75,000 for an elimination of an account clerk. Why not hire an additional teacher so both the 6th grade class and the 1st grade class have an appropriate amount of classrooms? This specific class suffered greatly during the early time of the pandemic, as all children did, we all did. But they did not get the typical experience of pre-K. They missed a lot of it. Has the school done any research on classes with students who have experienced pre-K pandemic learning loss? Changing structure, in my opinion, for these students who are in any way affected by the pandemic seems unfair. Individualized attention is necessary for all students at this point. What funding is available from AIS, the Academic Intervention Services, from the state that could offset the cost of an additional general education teacher? As I understand it, there is a lot of funding, federal and state, available to public schools now related to pandemic issues. It seems as though there are no definitive numbers for what is considered a large class size at Haldane and what is considered a small class size at Haldane. When will this be better defined to make these decisions easier moving forward? Personally, I understand that any budget change is a result of numbers, but it seems as though there is a prioritization of simple math over the emotional and social needs of 1st graders. I urge the board to look at the budget and find a solution where both the 1st and 6th grades have the appropriate amount of classrooms and teachers that they need. And that is what I wanted to bring to you all tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And I believe that those questions are detailed also in the email that you sent to us. So we can address those by when we have them logged as well. So
okay, great.
Great. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to information reports. We have heard from Christine Chairman. If you'd like to come and reiterate or take a moment. And then I know that you would like to.
I feel like I've had enough time this evening, but I do want to highlight one thing, which is the elementary performance of Seussical is next Thursday at 7 o'clock. The cast is from our 4th and 5th grade students, and it is fantastic. I have had the chance to attend a couple rehearsals, and it's pretty good. It's my return to the Haldane stage as well. I have 42 words. You should.
Who's counting?
I was asked, so I had to count. So everybody, please come. It's only a half an hour. It's a short production, not 3 hours of Oklahoma. So I encourage you to come see Seussical next Thursday. Any questions? No? Thursday, next Thursday, March 30th. March 30th, 7 p.m., right here in the Gymatorium.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Benante, did you want to?
I was just going to mention, as Dr. Silkey's coming up to provide, I'm sure, just a brief note or two, that as Ms. Sniffen, Mr. Twardy, Mr. Bauerlein, and Mr. Elder are not here this evening, I did try to include some notes from their reports in my opening comments, just as you're processing through.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Silkey?
Good evening again. I just want to highlight the assemblies that are coming up. I mentioned them very briefly, but just for more detail for the board, that the assembly that we're having this Thursday was due in large part to Teresa Lagerman's reaching out to Dr. Regine Galanti, and she is the author of Anxiety Relief for Teens. So grades 6 through 8 will be privy to her presentation and also receive a copy of her book, Anxiety Relief for Teens. So if you have a middle school child, you may see that come home, and that's a great. It's one of those books where you can just open it up, and every page is pretty much a different activity to help with anxiety relief. So it's a great book to work with your kids at home as well. And also thank you to Dr. Cation and the Haldane PTA and the Haldane School Foundation, who all played a role in making that assembly possible. And as I already mentioned, this Friday, Romeo and Juliet will be coming. So right where you're sitting right now, there'll be a performance of Romeo and Juliet. And grades 6 through 9 will be able to see that. And the wonderful thing is that the 6th grade had the opportunity to work with several actors from the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival in preparation for the performance. So we're very excited. And then next Tuesday, Dr. Michael Fowlin will come and present for 6th through 8th grade, You Don't Know Me Until You Know Me, which is a fast-paced, gripping piece of one-man show theater where Dr. Fallon takes on 9 different personalities of students who have gone through different difficult situations, and this helps to build empathy. So we're really looking forward to that, the end of March with all of these great enrichment activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Silke. Dr. Cation?
Good evening. Regina Cation, Director of Pupil Personnel Services. Thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to highlight some things very briefly. One is that in March, the week of March 6th was National Social Workers Week, and I just wanted to highlight some of the very good work that's happening here. We have Renee Curry, who works pretty much on the primary level, and then we have Scott Manny, who works on the secondary level, and they really do a tremendous amount of work. They work with families. They're really like the glue in the school teams, and you can find them any time of the day going above and beyond, and they really get to know the students. So I just wanted to really give them a shout out for all the work that they do all of the time for our students and for our families. I was going to highlight the author visit, which we're very excited about. I just wanted to mention one other thing about the play. It was so fantastic seeing Oklahoma for a variety of reasons. I went on Friday night. It was really noteworthy how many students were involved. And these students were, they came from varied backgrounds themselves. And it was just really terrific to see just really the sheer numbers, but also that it was an opportunity for so many kids to shine. So that was impressive. The other thing that was impressive, one more shout out to a colleague, to Jeff Sniffen. I feel like he was that show. He was doing everything, everywhere, all at once. He was doing tickets. He was helping up at the booth. He was walking around at one point with a portable screwdriver, and so he was. I think he built the sets, and so it was just very impressive. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Sniffen for the work that he did to make that happen. Any questions for me tonight?
No,
Thank you.
I agree with your support for Mr. Sniffen and for Ms. Curry in particular. We have a wonderful relationship with her. She's an amazing person. All right, I think that is administrators. Moving on to consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
These are the minutes from our January 17th workshop meeting. Any discussion? Oh, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No? All right. These are moving on to committee minutes. We have the district-wide safety team. I was pleased to see that we have those new phones up there in the Maple Merritt building for emergency purposes. I don't know if anyone wants to, I don't think any board members were present. Dr. Benante, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to share?
From that meeting, no. I would, the phones, just to provide further context, we had several rooms in the Maple Merritt building that did not have the ability to communicate directly with the main office in the high school. Obviously, it's a unique setup there, given it's an annex building disconnected from the high school, and we were able to establish phone lines for each of those rooms a couple of weeks ago, which is addresses a obvious safety concern for that particular building. We did discuss some recent events that have occurred in local schools, some what they call swatting events that are becoming more prominent, unfortunately, where calls are coming into schools that threatening, some sort of dangerous situation that's imminent or is occurring in buildings. And you may have read about this just nationally. It's becoming quite prominent across the nation. These calls often originate from outside the country, so they're very difficult for the FBI to track. There was a recent incident up in Beacon. So we reviewed those matters as a team, also discussed what if this were to happen here at Haldane. Obviously, it's very unpredictable. It could happen any day. What our response would be and how we would handle that situation. So we often debrief when we see these situations, especially if they're occurring locally. And that's the benefit of having Alteris, having the relationship with the Putnam County Sheriff's Office, is that they have access to information and their debriefs on those matters that they can then in turn work through with our team, so we can be prepared in the event that we encounter something similarly in our district. Let's hope not, but in the case that there is, we'll be prepared.
Great. All right. Thank you, Dr. Benante. Moving on to consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All right. Here we have the acceptance of the anonymous donation of lacrosse gloves and helmets and the approval of the Putnam County real property tax contract. Any discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No? All right. Moving on to consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
This is, we have one resignation and an appointment of the boys lacrosse volunteer. Any discussion? No? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Thank you. No? All right. These are our board committee reports. I don't know if we have a policy committee update. If Peggy, you want to share anything?
Because of some different issues, I think, actually one of them really good, that the boys were played at the state semifinals. We've rescheduled our most recent policy committee meeting, but we're in good shape, keeping up with the policy reports. But yeah, the work goes on.
All right. Nothing to report from WPSBA. All right. Unfinished business. Moving on to the Board of Education mid-year self-eval.
Hey, at least I got it out. Come on.
You did.
Memory hole.
That's right.
I said for the benefit of the public and everybody watching, this is on my agenda and seems to be the thing that falls through the crack. At least I got an email out to people in advance. So, and I did get some response, which is good. Great. So for the benefit of those following along at home or in person, the board regularly does a self-assessment, both mid-year and end-year. Mid-year is meant to be sort of a temperature check on glows and grows. Again, to use which we've been using for a while, thank you very much. And end of year, a more detailed assessment that leverages the same sort of rubric that we actually use for the superintendent's evaluation, much more detailed across 5 practices and I think 5 standards and 5 practices for each one. So I sent out a much belated request to the board for some feedback, and I did get some, which was good. So I will recap that at a high level, but also open the floor for anybody who has any points. We had a couple people who focused on goals rather than performance, which I thought was a great way to think about it. And for the benefit of the people attending, we have 4 board goals: support district campus master planning process, support district implementation of school climate survey, develop and agree on legislative advocacy priorities for the board, which always is something that we assess ourselves on, but has also been something that we sort of struggle with, what's our role. And finally, monitor the implementation of newly funded initiatives, which is something we've been anecdotally doing, but this was a goal for this year to start to do this more robustly. And for the people who did constructive feedback that way, there was a consistency. The campus master planning was just defined as a glow, something that we're taking an active and participatory role in, especially for the people who are serving on the board, but even for the greater Board of Ed, being engaged in the process, understanding what's going on, asking for and even restructuring the workshops so we have a more regular update on this process. So that's great. For the other 3, they're all grows for different reasons. Some because we're starting to hear about the information. The school climate survey is a good one. We're starting to hear about the outcomes and the process to align to that. Legislative advocacy priorities, frankly, because we haven't really sat as a board and had that discussion in an open session where we can say, what do we want to do? And the implementation of a number of the things that we have funded over time is a sort of procedural, we need to touch base on all those. So there's good alignment there. And from those who took a more traditional focus on our standards of communication, board efficiency, organization oversight, all those sorts of things, there was a focus on, again, communication, outreach to the community. How do we make sure everybody in the community can have their voice heard, but also make sure that every member of the board is supported in understanding and providing feedback to community members who engage them of their role as a board member, and not responding for the board, but being able to respond appropriately and thoughtfully without closing doors and but also passing on information the right way. So people feel supported in the appropriate process. I think it's the way. So that's kind of a summary of what I heard, but I would open it up for anybody else to chime in.
Well, I can say though we have not defined any legislative priorities, we had the occasion to meet with some of our representatives this year, and perhaps, you and Jen or previous board members have maybe taken a similar trip, but we did have an opportunity to have a little FaceTime with Dana Levenberg, our new rep here, who had some interesting questions and some, I would say, came in prepared with a couple of facts about the district that are out of date, quite frankly. So it was good to hear where our representative thinks we are, and it's an opportunity for us to properly inform, I think, as to actually where we are. So, yeah.
How are we out of date?
We're not out of date.
She's out of date with her expectations
yes,
and the perceptions
yes,
of Haldane.
Yes,
Got it.
yes. So
Okay,
like
you
10 years
correct her?
behind, like I hear this happen, and it was something that was, previous generations may have been considered. So, yeah.
Did the state, did we meet with the state senator?
I've
Robinson?
met with the state senator up at his office in the Poughkeepsie area individually, but or the board has not had an opportunity to meet him, but I know he would be open. They're in session right now, so maybe a little bit more difficult because they're working through the budget in the coming weeks to do so, but I have no problem reaching out to his office to see if he would be interested in meeting with board members who wanted to make themselves available during the week.
Has he explained high-impact tutoring?
No, I
Save that question.
I explained high-impact tutoring. Yeah, but the good news is on that in the legislative work with the budget, it does appear like that's being potentially removed. That's set aside, so that's not has not been voted upon, but that's been part of the one house budget recommendation.
All right.
I would just say, so as next steps, I would say maybe we should try to put on an agenda a discussion about legislative opportunities, to sort of congeal something, and maybe from sort of monitoring of investments, maybe we pick one or two that we know have come to a completion or come to a point, and work with the administration to say, do you think we could get 5 minutes on this and this between now and the end of the year?
Great.
And I also wanted to add one thing, and is, creating and adopting a new board member onboarding process. Is that part of it too? Peggy Peggy mostly had been working on that and had a wonderful start. You do so much. I don't know how you were going to sort of roll that out, but that has been worked on as well.
Yeah, and I actually thought that was one of our goals. So it's not, but it is something that I have done some work on. I have thought about. Maggie really generously, met and talked through with me some ideas. We came up with some plans, some key things. I mean, and that's sort of what we talked about doing, right, this year, that the goal really this year was not necessarily to end up with a final, onboarding document, but to definitely begin to identify the key things that we would want it to include. And I think we made a really good start for doing that. I'm just trying to think about, to the extent that our goal for this year, and again, I realize it's not a written goal because it's not there, but it's definitely something that we talked about it. To the extent that our goal was to begin to identify the pieces that would need to go into a process, that kind of process, I feel like we've made really good progress on that. I think one of the things, and maybe it's when we do our end of year evaluation, or maybe it's when we do our summer retreat, is really sort of define like a timeline for like getting that process in place. Yeah. So finalizing that document and what we really want it to look like. So yeah.
Great.
Thanks for bringing that up, Maggie.
Great. All right. Well, you're going to be speaking again, Peggy, because we're moving on to any additional comments you want to make about superintendent's evaluation now that we're all met?
Yes, I did. So since not everybody was able to be at our last meeting, I know everybody got the document with the timeline. If you didn't or would like me to resend it to you, please let me know. But one of the things I really wanted to talk about was our process for coming together to do the discussion of Dr. Benante's evaluation, right? So as everyone remembers, we'll have Dr. Benante typically does a really thorough job of writing a self-evaluation and providing quite a few documents to support his piece. And I know that the way we've done this historically, as long as I've been on the board, is everybody kind of goes off, not everybody kind of, but everybody reads those on their own. And then we come back together, primarily ending up focusing on each of our own comments and pieces of feedback that we want to be incorporated into the evaluation. And I'd actually like to try to do something a little bit different this year, and we don't have to decide tonight, but I wanted to throw it out there. I'd actually really like to bring the work that Dr. Benante does, his own written self-evaluation, a little bit more to the forefront in those conversations, just so that we're all considering all the pieces at once, our own important individual pieces of comment, of feedback or comments that we want to be integrated into that process, as well as this other work that he's done, sort of his own written pieces. And so one of the things I was just thinking about is I think we might need a little bit longer period of time. I'd like for us to think about planning an hour. I'd like to be really I know I'd like for us to be really mindful of time as we're going through the standards. And I'm willing to do this. I'd like for us to do just a quick review of what's in Dr. Benante's self-evaluation, as well as, again, the documentation that he provides to us, just so that we're all keeping everything at the top of mind. And we could talk that through a little bit now if people have feedback about it, if it's something people want to think about and we want to revisit, if people are not enthusiastic about that plan or have other thoughts about the plan. You know, I certainly I don't want to dictate what the process was, but I did want to suggest that as an innovation to what we've done in the past, or a difference.
I'm always in favor of innovation, so forbid me I don't want to prevent progress, but that seems like a great way to move forward. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes?
Okay. Yeah, I had really actually wanted to do the workshop. So NYSBA offers a workshop on doing the superintendent evaluation, which I've never participated in, right? Everything I've brought to this process, I brought actually from watching Evan Schwartz run the process for a number of years. I actually really am very committed to doing that workshop. It was offered when I already had a weekend commitment this spring, but I am assuming we decide we want me to do this next year, and assuming that I get reelected, it's definitely something I'd want to do in the fall for next year.
I realize you can't see us, but there's lots of nodding going on.
Okay, I can't see anything, so I appreciate that.
I can just see Ezra in your window, so I know.
Okay, I can't see Ezra, but I was looking at the piece of paper, so he was hidden. There's actually just one more thing, and it's in the document that I sent you all, but in reviewing the policies, it's actually come to my attention that there is a piece of it that we haven't been doing quite right. And that's determining the timeline in collaboration with the superintendent, and sort of filing it or sharing it with the district clerk in early September. So that will be that's just another thing that I've proposing for us to do moving forward.
Great. Thank you, Peggy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, moving on now to new business, CSE, CPSC recommendations. Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the Committees on Special Education and Preschool Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No? All right. Now, moving on to the resolution calling for the inclusion of Proposition 2 in notice of annual district meeting on May 16th. This resolution requires a motion, a second, and then a roll call vote. Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the resolution to include Proposition 2 in the notice of the annual district meeting on May 16th, 2023.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Ms. Shields?
President McNall.
Aye or yes?
Vice President Clements.
Yes.
Trustee Clemenson.
Yes.
Trustee Headland.
Yes.
Trustee Valentine.
Yes.
Great. All those in favor, yes. Now, moving on to the approval of the resolution calling for the annual district meeting vote on propositions and trustee elections on May 16th, 2023. This resolution also requires a motion, a second, and then a roll call vote.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the resolution calling for the annual district meeting vote on propositions and trustee elections on May 16th, 2023.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Ms. Shields?
President McNall.
Yes?
Vice President Clements.
Yes.
Trustee Clemenson.
Yes.
Trustee Headland.
Yes.
Trustee Valentine.
Yes.
Great. All right, moving on to our second communication from the public on all district matters. I think that those are closed. And moving on to board reflections. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? They haven't.
I would just say that Friday was lovely. Like it was like one of the traveled up to Glens Falls for the game and to see so many people there. I was a little bit worried about whether we had a quorum either of board members or the administration, but I was rested assured that there's enough people back here to make sure that things. There are also plenty of students there at the same time, so I will typically. But the enthusiasm and the excitement of the people who were there, the fact that this team has come so far and done so well, and just they're lovely people and lovely coaches. So that was, and then to come back and see the play, and it was packed. Yeah. And it was exciting. It's opening night. And it was just like one of those days where you're like, beyond, in addition to all of the academic work, but this is like the community coming together and big cross sections, but different parts for fantastic things at Haldane. I thought it was lovely. It's lovely.
I ran into John breathless as he just made it in for the show to start with his family. So thank you for being everywhere all at once.
So apropos.
Yes, it is. Anyone?
I do. I attended the middle school, the community read back in, and I don't know if that was early March, end of February now, but it was amazing. I just wanted to express my appreciation for the staff that showed up. There was a themed refreshment. Ezra, you were there too. There was a themed little reception in the cafeteria with blue icing on the cupcakes, and then we all disbanded to different rooms, and I had Mr. Sniffen and Carolyn Llewellyn actually led the discussion of the book with a series of sixth graders, and it was, what's the word? It was inspiring to hear sixth grade, literary analysis in that night. It was very impressive. Makes me feel a little better about the world. So thank you. That was a lovely evening.
I will double that, Maggie. I was in awe, so much so that I wrote an email. I was shocked. So I was in a conversation with sixth graders, and it was very well attended by the sixth grade class. It was with Mr. Wick and, I'm going to forget the librarian's name, is Eckes, Miss Eckes. And, I forgot the other person. I'm going to tell you, I was just absolutely, it's in the email that I sent to Dr. Soki. But I was just in awe. And the whole time, there's a picture of me that Dr. Soki took, and I'm just like this, listening to this group of sixth graders.
My kids aren't dumb.
No, they're far beyond. And you're just like, wow. And that was magic, just magic. So what an incredible event. And from going from that, which is the academic side, to I have a very small house, and in our one room, we screaming at the top of our lungs as we came close to winning that game was pretty miraculous. We had some guests from out of town who are from Haldane, and they don't care much about basketball. And they were like, wow, I'm so excited about this game now because you and Allegra are so excited about this game right now. And that was great. Amazing.
Great. All right, Dr. Benante. Peggy.
At the risk of just repeating what folks have said about the weekend of boys basketball, I was so impressed by the just unrelenting commitment and determination and positivity and forward movement of the team and of Coach Vergidamo. It was really I found it very moving. And since then, I've seen Coach Vergidamo just post a couple of just really lovely, warm, appreciative posts on Twitter that I just think speak, so represent so nicely, sort of what, some of the really great things about the school district. And I wanted to voice my appreciation of that.
Thank you, Peggy. All right. Dr. Benante?
I think it's all been said.
Oh, great. Wonderful. All right. Then I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Any opposed? No? Good. All right. Thank you, Peggy.